How? We won again! This is good. But what is best in life?
Linear Metroidvanias, cutting-edge graphics, gameplay for health, and the story spoon-fed.
Wrong! Conan, what is best in life?
Play Elderand. So of its multiple endings. And you hear the epic music rocking in the background.
That is good. That is good.
Men sent by a great priest approach an enigmatic figure. They hand the weary man a saturated parchment. Scrawled on the damp cloth, a name. Surthrus, tyrant of the sands. The mercenary nods. Contract struck. He boards their ship. The destination? A mystical island only ever whispered in heedful tones. Elderand. But, unfortunately for a mercenary, a sudden storm capsizes their boat, as if the very fates themselves wished to halt his mission. But even the fates cannot stop our intrepid mercenary. He awakens among the debris and the dead bodies of his crewmates. Rubbing the haze from his eyes, he smirks. Elderand. Perhaps the fates aren't so cruel after all. Rising to his feet, he finds a sword among the wreckage and trudges onward. After all, he still has a contract to uphold. Elderand's a Conan the Barbarian-inspired Metroidvania that feels bigger than it actually is, and that's a compliment. I completed the entire game with nearly 99% map completion and got its true ending in just a couple of sittings, and I was certain it took me a dozen hours or more. I checked the in-game time after the credits rolled and was floored. Less than 5 hours. No way! For some reason, the journey through Elderand's world captivated me to such a degree that I lost all concept of time. I even looked at the nearly completed map and couldn't believe how small it actually was. What was it about Elderand that immersed me so much that it created the illusion that it was more epic than it truly was? That's what we're going to find out today. I gotta say, I enjoyed Elderand's combat. It felt visceral. Bloody spurts, screen shakes, and satisfying slashing sounds complemented each strike, and each weapon had heft behind it, requiring some wind-up before the actual hit. You only have a basic 3-hit combo, but it's pretty rare you'll pull one off, as most enemies just tank your strikes and hit you right back mid-swing. So, a lot of the combat in the early game is just you hitting something, holding up your shield to block, and then repeating this until one of you dies. It's not the most thrilling exchange, but you do have a stamina meter to manage, so it's not completely mindless. The stamina is only used for blocking and dashing, leaving jumping and attacking as your best option. It doesn't take long for all your encounters to devolve into this. I know that looks ridiculous, but it feels great in practice. I enjoyed mastering the timing and rhythm of each enemy so I could pull off this jump attack sequence. It reminded me a lot of Rogue Legacy. You all ever play that game? I highly recommend it despite the fact that I hate roguelites. Where was I? Oh yeah, combat and abilities. There's not a whole lot of traversal abilities to unlock in this game. Double jump, air dash, and a hook shot. Pretty standard fare for a Metroidvania. There's another ability that's pretty unique that gets you past these purple vine walls, but I don't want to spoil it. Just know it's pretty cool and not at all how I imagined I'd get past them. Let's talk about gear. The mercenary, or hunter as the NPCs call him or her, has a large variety of weapons he or she can equip, each with varying ranges and attack speeds. Some weapons even do cool things like add burn status to your attacks. It was always a delight to find new instruments of death to use on my enemies. Armor and shields, as you can imagine, fortify your defense, and accessories do all kinds of weird things, just as accessories in good Metroidvanias should. Eventually, you earn access to a blacksmith that increases your gear's stats in exchange for materials you find while adventuring. The cash you collect can be used at a traveling merchant's shop to purchase gear and consumable potions. These potions can be assigned to your shoulder buttons and gradually heal your HP or MP or provide temporary stat boosts. You'll most likely be spending your cash on these. The final piece of gear to talk about are sub-weapons. These are limited attacks that are reminiscent to the sub-weapons found in Castlevania games, with the axe behaving exactly like it does when the Belmonts chuck them. To replenish your sub-weapons, you have to rely on enemy drops and breakable pots, and based on my Wonder Boy and Monster Boy analyses, you know I hate that. Anytime sub-weapons are consumable, I never use them. Plus, they didn't do that much damage anyway. But let's say swords and whips and axes and shields aren't your thing. then I suppose you could be lame and use staves and bows. Equipping staves allows you to use magic, usually a projectile or something. I don't really know. I never used magic. I think one of the staves lets you create a shield. I didn't level up the stat that increased MP, so I never had enough to do anything. Same with the bow. I didn't really like buying arrows and never increased my dex. I only ever increased strength and vitality because...
Wow, that's a lot of words. Too bad I'm not reading them.
This brings us smoothly into Elderand's leveling system. First off, I didn't know the game even had a leveling system until I beat the first boss. I'm not sure if I missed a tutorial screen or if the game didn't tell me. Either way, the game got a ton easier once I figured it out. Like most games with traditional leveling systems, the hunter gains EXP by killing things. Once he levels up, and you'll know because the game makes a big deal out of it, you get a point to spend on a stat of your choice. Strength for hitting harder, vitality for more HP, wisdom for wimps, and dex also for wimps. Exploration in Elderand was fantastic, especially because combat was fun and fast. I've played Metroidvanias where combat got in the way of exploring instead of complementing it, but because the hunter in Elderand is so quick and battles so smooth, it never felt cumbersome to backtrack. Sometimes while exploring, I wanted to crush my enemies, see them driven before me, and hear the lamentation of their women, as is best in life. But sometimes I'd rather just jump and dash over jabronis so I could get to where I needed to go. It all depended on my mood, and Elderand allows you to listen to your heart when it comes to the decision of murdering your enemies or ignoring them. You also unlock fast travel between all save points pretty early in the game, so that made backtracking even easier. And you'll be doing a lot of backtracking as there's a lot of cool stuff to find on the island. Weapons obviously being the highlight. You can also find stat increasing orbs, key items for quests, blood rituals, and sacrificial ceremonies that you for some reason are perfectly fine in partaking, you weirdo. And notes that explain the story, because of course the story's explained through notes. This is a post-Dark Souls era game after all, isn't it? If you want to know what's going on, you better love stopping everything you're doing so you can read pages of out of context and non-chronological entries so you can piece together everything on your own. Is that what you love to do? Because you know I love to do it. God damn game, you know my weakness. We'll revisit the story in a moment. For now, let's talk environments. Elderand's biomes are all interesting and connect in sometimes surprising ways. I think all MV fans love a good loop around to previous biomes, and Elderand delivers, even with such a small map. As for the biomes, yeah, they're neat. You start in a cave, which is typically not my favorite, but I'll let it slide. Then you can go into the Forest of the Exhausted, where most millennials live. Am I right, guys? Yeah, you know it. What makes this stupid joke even more depressing is that the forest is populated by zombies. Other biomes include a ruined city lousy with bandits, a couple of castles full of cultists, an area stuck in caveman times, and this fleshy place that has this background music that sounds like a choir of angels. As well-informed and avid gamers, we all know angel choirs are reserved for heavenly places, so it struck me as odd to hear angelic singing in such a gross area. Turns out, this is a great piece of atmospheric/environmental storytelling. But I didn't catch it at first because the notes alluding to the reason why there'd be a creationist-like atmosphere in such a hellish place are scattered everywhere. It felt great to piece it all together myself, and I think that's the appeal of asynchronous storytelling, which I don't think that's what you call reading the story while playing a video game, but that's what I'm calling it. Getting back on track, I gotta say I loved Elderand's overall presentation. The graphics pleased me with their colorful sprites and nice particle effects. The enemy designs were pretty cool, ranging from humanoids to mutated monstrosities to eldritch horrors, my favorite kind of horrors, and the music, bruh, this music goes hard. Even my wife was impressed at how good this music was. Returning to enemy designs, let's talk bosses. The bosses gave off some heavy Conan the Barbarian vibes, so you know I dug them. There's this spider lady and a golem and a lesbian vampire because hell yeah, and a big blubbery god from another dimension, but the boss that takes home the most inspired by Conan the Barbarian award goes to Surthris. This ridiculously buff snake man looks amazing and is exactly the kind of monster I wanted to fight in my Conan-like Metroidvania. Conan-like? Ugh, that should totally be a new genre. Anyway, the only thing that could have made Surthris better is if he were voiced by James Earl Jones himself. Okay, I think I'm finally ready to talk about the game's narrative. I can't say I completely understood it, but I liked it nonetheless. As stated earlier, a large chunk of the story is told through notes you find during exploration. It's completely possible to be lost about what's going on if you neglect to read these notes. So if you want to understand who the hidden optional boss Eric Zan is and why he's being tortured, you better do your homework. Here's something interesting. During my playthrough, I actually found Eric Zan long before I found any notes mentioning him or what he's done on the island. So when I fought him, I had no clue what was going on. It wasn't until I went to the opposite end of the island and found all his research notes that I figured out what was going on with him. That's when I realized how open the game actually was, because I was supposed to find his research papers first. I had played these sequences of events backwards. Many Metroidvanias are far less open than you'd think, so finding ones that are truly open, even if it's just for certain sections of the game, is always a thrill. Who would have thought a tiny 5-hour Metroidvania would actually nail openness? It's kind of impressive. Returning to the narrative, it's your basic anti-hero reluctantly saves the world type thing, but it works. I'm not going to say the character sold the story, as really the only character I kinda liked was Aloria, the village witch or whatever. And the cultists and villains weren't really fleshed out, which is fine considering how short the game is. What really sold the narrative for me was its creative plot and setting. Yes, we have the cosmic entity trying to get into our dimension trope, but damn it if I ain't a sucker for it. I'm just as bad as the women who love those Hallmark Christmas movies. They swoon over small town hunks, I salivate over tentacled monstrosities. I've made my peace with this fact. But just because the narrative leans heavily on tropes doesn't mean it should be dismissed. The world Elderand constructs and the delivery of its information, though derivative of the genre, is done in a skillfully succinct way. What Elderand does in just 5 hours blows my mind. We go from nameless mercenary fighting a cult trying to take over an island to chosen one coursing with Titan blood returning to his birthland to stop an interdimensional being. And maybe relying on tropes is the game's secret sauce. You can save a whole lot of time if you don't have to explain too much because everyone's already familiar with the cliches. If that's the case, then I have to say, bravo, it totally worked. Another feather in Elderand's cap is its superb use of multiple endings. You have a basic ending you can get pretty early that you know sucks, then there's another ending if you don't complete a certain boss fight correctly. Hint, it's exactly like the Richter fight in Symphony where you have to equip a certain item to see the real thing you have to defeat, and I freaking loved it. And of course, if you do complete the boss fight correctly, you'll get the true ending. And getting that true ending requires you to do a lot of optional content, like going back in time via a mirror so you can get a thing to free an imprisoned god who you can then find in an optional biome, leading to an optional boss fight that unlocks a cool new ability you have to use to get the true ending. There's nothing new here. Heck, I already kinda spoiled it by saying one of the fights is a direct ripoff of Symphony, but Elderand implements everything so well and at a speedy yet satisfying clip that it's hard to get upset at its plagiarism. In the end, I quite enjoyed the narrative plot and setting, not despite its familiarity, but because of it. Elderand's an anomaly of a Metroidvania because it's a microcosm of what a great and epic Metroidvania should do and how a great and epic Metroidvania should feel. And it does it all in under 5 hours. I know I keep harping on this, but it truly is an impressive feat. Elderand nails everything excellent Metroidvanias should nail in such a short span. I've played enormous 30-hour MVs that just don't get the formula right. I'm looking at you, Iterna Noctis, but we'll get to you soon enough. Believe that. Heck, I've even played MVs with runtimes similar to Elderand that didn't get much right, mainly because they lean on infantile jokes and deconstruct the genre for lame meta humor. This dig's aimed at Tomomi, which you can totally watch my analysis of right now if you're cool. Spoilers, I actually liked that game. Point is, Elderand's great. It doesn't add much to the genre, but it knows what makes the genre great and works it masterfully. And because it takes everything that's great and addictive about MVs and refines it into such a small package, the game feels bigger than it actually is. Super fast combat, rhythmic battle strategies, great quality of life implementations like fast travel, a simplistic leveling system, fun gear to find that enhances exploration, multiple endings that require extra steps and lead to a bunch of extra content, and a narrative that's both familiar yet interesting. All this adds up to create an engaging experience that's hard to put down, and I think that's the magic behind Elderand's illusion of epicness. I felt like this game was longer than it actually was because I got immersed. There's very little downtime in this game, and with you always moving and fighting and exploring and learning about the world, you get sucked in, just like a good book. I highly recommend Elderand to hardcore Metroidvania fans, simply because I think you'll also be impressed with how much fun you'll have in such a short time. This game really is fascinating with how great it is for how short it is. I think newcomers will like Elderand too, but be mindful that it's very violent, so when I say newcomers, I don't mean children. Gotta be responsible around here. So, if you're looking for a new MV, you can't go wrong with Elderand. It may not redefine the genre or add anything new, but sometimes being a cliche is fine as long as you do it the best.